I'm Sheila McKinnon, Manager of Art Services for the City of Surrey and one of your hosts for this summit. I hope you're having a great time. Our second panel for the summit is truly accomplished and award-winning. Each panel member could be a keynote speaker. I have great respect and admiration for each of them, and we knew that we needed somebody equally talented and inspiring to be our panel moderator. With many accolades to her name, Prem Gill, the CEO of Creative BC, was named one of the Globe and Mail's 10 women who matter in film and TV. She believes in the advocacy and advancement of creative industries. She is a passionate leader who also devotes a great deal of her time to the not-for-profit film festival scene. Please welcome Prem Gill. I didn't bring my step stool, so I'm going to, hello everybody. Thank you, Janice. That was really inspiring, and I think it's going to lead us right into our next panel and discussion. And I don't want to spend too much time chatting, but it is, I've been in my role for about a year at Creative BC, and if you don't know Creative BC, we are a provincial agency funded by the province of British Columbia to support the economic development of the creative industries. And in terms of everything you talked about, leadership and mentorship, I truly believe I ended up in my role through sponsorship as well. But I had people out there encouraging me. I wasn't even interested in applying for this job. I was actually quite happy in what I was doing. But it was through people actually coming to me and saying, you know what, it's time to sort of try and put yourself out there. And it does make a difference when you actually have people who are encouraging you to push yourself. And you know, and look what happened. Here I am. So our next panel is called Succeeding as Future Cultural Leaders, and it's really going to be building on the conversation that Janice has set up for us. I'm going to ask the three panelists to come up, and then I'm actually going to sit at the end so that people can see me as well. So first we have Sal Ferreira. Sal is the Provost and VP of Quabbin College. He also has a PhD in ethnomusicology, and he's a Juno nominee, so welcome, Sal. And we have Howard. Howard, I was going to ask you a question about that HR thing on the panel, but you already preempted it. So Howard is 14 years as director, spent 14 years as director of the Arts Club in Vancouver. He's on many boards, including the Canada Arts Council, the TELUS Community Board, BC Artscape, and he teaches about creative industries at Simon Fraser. Welcome, Howard. Bert Taylor. Bert Taylor is the co-director of the UBC Centre for Cultural Planning and Development and was also the VP of Cultural Celebrations and Education for the 2010 Games. So welcome to everybody. Okay, does this work? Okay. Excellent, this is much better. So as I mentioned, we're going to focus on the what do we need to build cultural leaders, and what is a picture of cultural leadership? Can everybody hear me? Is this my? Right? And I'm going to ask each of the panelists as our first sort of question to you. So what we're going to do is spend about half an hour asking these guys. I'll ask them some questions, and then we'll follow by some questions from all of you. So in response to some of the things that Janice was saying, I know several things resonated with me, but I'd like to start at the end with Bert and make our way across. I should also say the three of these folks have a very interesting connection to each other. This is not the first time we've talked about it. I think it was you the other day who said, you and Sal were driving to a meeting to go with Howard and Sal. So you've been having these conversations for a long time, and I know that you've all been very invested in this conversation around not just leadership building, but building organizations and continue, and certainly in our province here, building on the value of these investments as well. So what are some of the key things that resonated with you in terms of what Janice has put?
Do I really have to go first? First of all, it was an absolute pleasure to hear everything that Janice said, because I actually agree with every word that Janice said, which is a very rare thing for any sort of public context that I find myself in. although I do have one question, that is, how does somebody like Rudy Giuliani say that and then become a Trump supporter? There are mysteries in the universe that are much greater than
there were never pre-Trump days, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, these
That's
are...
a different panel.
Well, it isn't, because I wanted to raise the point that, in fact, everybody has Trumps, large and small, in their operating context. And one of the biggest challenges we all face is providing the kinds of leadership that will actually move people who disagree fundamentally with what we advocate and propose, or don't understand it, don't get it, otherwise prioritize other things, et cetera, et cetera. So the one thing I'm going to pick out of what Jenna said was clarity, and the importance of understanding the process that you're leading and making sure that the great people are in the room, whichever room and at whichever table that happens to be. And Janice used the example of the two people who shouldn't have been there. And I would like to emphasize the complement to that, which is making sure that the right people are in the room. And one of the things that has been the biggest challenge, I think for all of us, is making sure that all of the people who not only have ideas about what needs to be done or what the outcome should be in the room, but also all of the people who are going to be responsible for implementing it, because they have to own it. So I'll just leave it at that.
Sal?
Thank you, and I also have to say that I agree with a whole lot of what I heard Janice say. In particular, I guess the diagram where you follow collaboration, disruption, clarity, and focus, and that's essentially the artistic way. That is exactly what every artist has to go through. And in fact, the artistic work that many of you do, that's exactly what you have to follow. I love the particular part around accidental encounters, because that in fact is many of the things that we have encountered in developing a number of the things that have made Surrey or Richmond or another microphone, Surrey or Richmond or Vancouver the actual experience that they are. The movement of ideas, or the mobilization of ideas, of thought, of action, has to be infused with something artistic which motivates. And Janice in her talk described a number of things that hit us at our core. It's that exchange, those balls in that beautiful atrium, or the ball that the guy was sort of bouncing against, or the little kid was holding on to. That important exchange of being able to touch ideas, be able to be part of an experience, be able to participate in art is at the foundation of culture. And I thank you, Janice, for what you said, because it just electrified my thinking.
I'll try this one. I'll do some rap now. I agree mostly with Janice. I think absolutely.
We've known each other a long time.
And to point to Sel's remarks about the step process, that is a greater process, without a doubt. I want to sit on one of them, which resonated for me in terms of thinking about, and this just really goes to a lot of the work that you all do in your communities, certainly as cultural planners, the concept of collaboration, and really the word that actually, and I'm not trying to be splitting a hair, but the word that actually works for me even more than collaboration is partnership. Partly because I think what we're seeing today in terms of creating of cultural spaces, creating of the projects that artists are working in today, and as said in my introduction, I have the pleasure of working with young artists right now, emerging artists and creative entrepreneurs, and they're all about partnership at every level, whether the work that they create, the way in which they think about who they are as artists. They don't singularly identify themselves as just a filmmaker or just a theater artist or just a dancer, but they're looking at themselves as multidisciplined, interdisciplined, all of that. And that's through intense aligned partnerships. And that's their process as well, which leads to the creative and cultural spaces that we develop, one of the great successes that we have in our region, obviously, is some of the cultural spaces that have been developed. Progress Lab, as a good example, the Post is another good example at the CBC building. And so I think that's where I think a lot of it is going. The red ball was an interesting thing for me to think, and my thought went back to an article I read in the New York Times about a month ago, and it was actually about the city of Pittsburgh. And some of you may have read it about their initiative to partner with Uber to literally test pilot 100 autonomous cars in the city of Pittsburgh. Now, interesting article. I was really curious about what they were going to do with that. But more interesting was actually the quote from the mayor of Pittsburgh, who said, "I had the opportunity to wrap this in red tape or roll out the red carpet." And I thought that was just a perfect quote for the world we live in. Because the more we can roll out the red carpet with our community, with our officials, with our city councilors, that that can happen. The big example actually in our community right now was the mural project in Vancouver, which I have no idea how that happened. It broke every bylaw you can imagine, but it somehow happened, and the red carpet did roll out. So I think that's interesting.
I can tell you a little bit about the mural project. While I wasn't directly involved in it, it's one of the band members of a band called Hey Ocean, Dave Bertessi, and he actually told me about this idea just over about a year ago. And he had this idea of like transforming. I live in this neighborhood where this mural festival is going on. It's called Mount Pleasant, where he wanted to transform buildings. He's going to pitch it to the mayor, and I was looking at him like, you've never done anything like this. How are you even going to get money out of the city? How are you going to motivate businesses to be a part of this? And he just had he's like, why wouldn't they want to be part of this? So he just went for it. And that goes to, I think, your point earlier, Janice, about just, he was kind of relentless and had somewhat of a business plan and ideas behind it, attached to it. But he's that, I don't think he would call himself a cultural leader, but he is one. I mean, this is probably going to be a recurring event, hopefully in Vancouver. The street was shut down, there were bands playing, and you can still, in these gray days of Vancouver right now, wander around and look at these murals, and it's become an interesting activity. I have a question. As all of you are part of post-secondary institutions in some form, what's happening in the schools? Like, what are we doing in post-secondary institutions to reach, certainly increase the diversity of people interested in working in the cultural sectors, but also in that, getting them even to a point where they may be interested in being the next Dave Bertessi or working in these sectors. What are you seeing happening? Are things changing?
Things are changing profoundly, I think. But can I just say that the proponent of the mural festival had great partners, in the cultural planners and the elected officials in the senior management. And that included because they have infected the engineering department and the apprentice department and everything else, that they had really good collaborators right across the board. So again, in terms of, I can't speak for the others, we'll let them speak for themselves, but I think some of what is going on now is technologically enabled. It is really a greater appreciation on the part of post-secondary educators and institutions that not all knowledge comes from the fount of academe. The practitioners, the people who have got experience and have proven track records, have been the innovators and the leaders in any particular field of practice, are in fact the providers of the most practical educational experiences and opportunities for the future. And I say that because that's exactly how we tried to create this UBC Center for Cultural Planning and Development. It's global because it is online and it's accessible to everyone. We have a global student body, which creates all kinds of trouble with time zones, but in fact is an unbelievable contribution to the educational value of the experience as well. And I think the fact that we can actually draw our instructors from the best practitioners around the globe and ensure that our student body extends the Creative City Network to include practitioners all around the world it gives you an understanding that there are new models for cultural leadership being created all the time. And not to mention, BAM, again soon, there'll be lots for us to talk about, I think.
Well, thank you. First of all, I just want, my external relations director would not let me leave this room without correcting one thing. Friend, when you said Quantum College, that was about 35 years ago.
Okay.
Quantum Polytechnic
I have written
University.
down.
I'm okay now, Marlene. Thank you. Anyway, what I'd like to say is that the one thing that we're all doing, I mean, I work for one institution, but we're all connected in many, many ways, is that we've turned to listen. We used to lecture and now we listen. And what we're listening to is a whole generation of, I guess, innovators and disruptors that really have no time for the way things used to be done and want to call the shots the way they see. And what do they see? They see sharing, they see collaborating, and they see pushing municipalities, civic governments, federal governments to just do things a different way. This is the real face of what we all, in one way or another, call student-centered. And what are we doing? Well, the students are pushing involvement in community or creating micro-communities within their own campuses or even their own departments, and connecting those directly with direct action in social justice or in cultural leadership or in crime prevention, youth at risk, all of those things. And they're very connected to a number of levels that I don't remember being connected as a student. I was so focused on just practicing that I didn't see that connection to others. So there's a number of institutions in both UBC, SFU, and us, and UVic and other institutions as well that are seeing those student-centered initiatives and are basically just guiding them. This is maybe one good way to do this. This is the information that is out there. These are the people that are talking about it. Go there and knock them out, and that's a very exciting time to be in.
And Howard, you teach cultural entrepreneurship.
That's right, and actually interesting, you called it cultural entrepreneurship, which is interesting. My actual program is creative entrepreneurship, but my dean has asked me to change the title to creative and cultural entrepreneurship, which is actually the point I wanted to make a little bit. But only to say I've just joined academia only a couple of years ago, so you can tell by my lack of gray hair compared to my colleagues here that I'm not, sorry, it doesn't reflect wisdom. What I want to actually take Sal's point a little bit further, and what I've been absolutely intrigued with by my introduction to working in this world is that I'm working with millennials, whatever that means today. I'm not really sure, but one of the things I'm learning is that they're coming at it from a whole different way than I did when I was their age, when it comes to how they think about themselves as artists, as citizens of our society. So one of the objectives of our program, Creative and Cultural Entrepreneurship, is really helping these artists build a career around what they're passionate about. And that's pure and simple. What we're trying to do is help them really develop a way to think about how to move themselves forward as artists. But what I've learned over the last couple of years working with these students and in our community now is that they're as much interested in not only being artists, but as they are in making the world a better place. They as much, I know it sounds a little trite because they're all idealists at the core, but more than that, they really are coming at it from a place that as artists, they have a responsibility to actually improve the world and to create. So the projects and the programs and the ideas, the crazy ideas that we were talking about earlier, are all coming out with a high level of social impact and a high level of social engagement. That's at the core of what they do, not in addition to what they do, but at the core of what they do.
So do you think? Yeah.
Could I just draw one distinction here, because I think we're falling into the pattern that we very often do, which is useful, but it also is useful to draw the distinction of the difference between arts leadership and creativity and cultural leadership and creativity. Creativity and the arts are at the core of everything that we all do, I think. But both the range of approach and the skill sets required and the nature of the responsibility or the accountabilities back to communities and authorities and things like that is fundamentally different. And I think we do at some point need to kind of talk about the cultural aspect of it, in particular because we're facing a lot of cultural minors. But the community that they represent, that they advocate for, that they work to facilitate the works of, are artists. And so, this conversation, we do need to understand, how the arts leadership needs to be developed, in part because we will have to cultivate some of that context.
So does the leadership, well, culturally, arts, creativity, I work with filmmakers, musicians, and my job is to create jobs. But at the heart of it, it's artists who are driving those jobs, whether it's a big Hollywood movie or, a band like Hey Ocean. And, there's been lots of cultural arts leadership in Canada has come from the artists themselves who end up running organizations. And is that, so Howard, you were talking about your, sort of kind of leading into what you're getting at, Bert, is these students want to approach things differently, it's driving their passion. Do we send those artists who want to become leaders to the BAM Center to do courses and work with cohorts over the years? But is that something that has shifted in terms of where that leadership may or may not come from? But also, what does that role then become of the leader to foster and build that that cultural community, whatever the discipline is? You look like you want to say something.
I do want to say something. I stopped my remark at what the students are, how the students find themselves working. I want to go a little further into that and go to where Bert went, which is talking about arts leadership. What's changed from when I feel like an older person, from the point of view when I started my career. What's changed is that, the ways in which we measured our success were primarily economic. Were how many bums and seats was I getting, how many jobs was I creating, et cetera, et cetera. And today, and which is why I wanted to chat about social impact and the role of the artist, is that today's leaders aren't looking at that anymore. They're looking at the way they absolutely are connecting to community, the relevance they have, the diversity of which their world is in the way, not only the way they create, but in the way that they are affecting people's lives through areas of captivation, through areas of intellectual stimulation, through areas of social bridging. Is their work actually building new empathy and understanding, or more empathy and understanding of different cultures? That's the new measurement tool. The problem is we don't really actually know how to measure that stuff yet really well. There is work being done on it, and if you look at right now the work that's being done in the UK at the Arts Council of England, they've just announced an intrinsic impact measurement for their clients in a way to measure and understand their clients' impact in their community. The problem with that, though, and that's the debate, is that they're putting the measurement of artistic quality in the hands of the audience. And that's something we have to be cautious of. Those of you who work in peer assessment committee structures really need to take that into consideration as you move forward with how you actually measure an arts organization and an artist's impact in their community.
That's really interesting. The influence of the audience has never been more prominent as it is now through social media tools, search engines, everything in, one of the projects that I started at TELUS was called Story Hive, and it was all based on audience demand for your product, and that's what will get funding. So it is a tricky space that you're talking about. Sal, you are an artist yourself. You are, an educator now as well. How did you, in terms of, your journey to get where you are, but also what you're seeing changing in terms of what someone might be where you were 25 years ago, ending up where you are now?
That was a long time ago. Let me just be clear about that. And yes, I've been very fortunate that throughout my career as a student, and then as a performer, and then as an educator, each career sort of tripped into the other one, probably for all the same core motivations that I still don't even know. I'd like to say that the journey of cultural leadership, if that's what actually I had the opportunity to do, was an accidental one. That's why the accidental encounters that Janice mentioned was resonated so much with me. I just wanted things to be different from where I found them. And what I found in a number of the institutions was a number of students, a number of artists of all capacities, visual arts, dance, and music and theater. I found people who were trying to bump or who were bumping up against a very rigid system that we had somehow to disrupt. We had to disrupt in order to succeed as artists. As I moved in through moving out west and working in Victoria and then in Vancouver, actually Bert was one of the first people that I came across in that world, where I was looking for somebody who would just get out of the way, do a little funding. He helped us at Expo. This was Expo '86, where we came with these crazy ideas, and we just needed the funding. But the accountability part, we'll do our best on that side, and we've been getting better ever since. But just give us a chance to move forward. And that's why when in my first comments I said that none of our work would have been possible without the champions that are those people in this room. It's important to listen. It's important to understand that your process is that artistic process. It's the same thing, so you have a bridge there. But that the most important thing that you can do is to try to understand whether that artist is connected to your community. If there's something in your community that that artist should know about, or if there's some part of the sort of central nervous system of your community that would be useful information for that artist, please share that, because it was very useful for a number of us. Burke and many other leaders, like Howard and many others, gave me that extra little information that, you're reaching out to a market, here's what that market's really all about, and here's how people identify with that market. We're so focused on our individual artistic expression that we don't always expand into that. Again, the programs that some of the post-secondaries are doing are trying to open up that mind to give that artist some of those other essential skills that are broadening our scope of work and are creeping into areas that originally were not part. So it's a harder time to be an artist, it's a better time to be an artist, and it's a great time to be a citizen.
So Bert, how did you get out of Sal's way? But also, you are kind of a leader breeder, right? There's many people that have come through working with you, whether it was a part of the Cultural Olympiad, or your students, people you work with at UBC. What is it, what's your secret sauce in breeding leaders?
Leader.
I
like that. I appreciate that. I think it's because, like Sal, you are a change agent to start with. I think that's true for everybody in the room, and you go from there. And I think, in terms of the development of cultural planning, it wasn't even a job, 25, 30 years ago. Now it's a profession. But I think cultural planners have been ahead of the arts councils for quite some time on this particular subject matter. Because artistic merit, no question of the value of that, and that's what arts councils have been operating by for 50 years, 60 years. Cultural planners have had to be the ones who are out there getting the resources for artists to be able to do their thing. And in order to do that, we've had to learn the language of all of the rest of the community, in addition to the language of the arts. And making the case for the arts is really about sort of addressing the insecurity of politicians who are saying, why are we giving artists money? We don't give anybody else money in the entire city. Why would we take property tax dollars and give it to somebody to operate? And the best case we've ever been able to make is the thing that puts us just a little bit ahead by saying, we're not giving the money to the artists for the artists' benefit. We're giving the money to the artists and the arts organizations for the benefit of the community as a whole. Right? It's the impact that they have. It's the way they interact with the rest of the community. It's the social benefits. It's the economic benefits. It's the educational benefits. It's how they work with children at risk. It's how they work with immigrant settlement. It's there's just no stopping the importance or the breadth of impact of the arts. So we've always been kind of operating from the perspective of the impact in the community and sort of the social responsibility and the social benefits. We never told the artists that. You know, that's the only way you're ever going to get money out of the politicians and the councillors and even the cooperation of the engineering department. But I think it's also the future of the most important issue facing all of our communities, which I'd like to get to at some point, which is reconciliation. Because it really is now it's really about relationships, and that's where the artists can play an even greater role.
We're going to get to questions in a moment, but I just sort of building on a couple of things you've all said. I sort of think about not to be, crisis oriented, but what are we in danger of, as cultural leaders, everybody in here, whether they're working for municipalities or for nonprofit organizations, what is our biggest fear? We have to deal with this now, or we're going to go sideways. Is there anything that keeps you up at night around that? Sal?
Absolutely.
The only fear is complacency.
That's exactly what my answer. Exactly. Absolutely. But to your question to Burke about his secret sauce, the secret sauce for all of us actually is how do we build loyalty? How do we understand that the relationships that we build are the most intrinsic, solid case for support, case for need, case for relevance that we could ever have? We build relevancy from a city planning point of view. You're building relevancy through getting taxpayers to really understand the value and importance of the arts. Through an arts organization, an artist, loyalty is the most important relationship, strategic imperative priority that you can absolutely push forward. Because without loyalty, you don't really have a place and a group to do it with. And if you could expound any energy, that's where it needs to be spent. Because with any business, whether you're home hardware or whether you're an arts organization or whatever, if you're not building loyalty, you don't have a model which to be sustainable with.
Sorry, I didn't answer your question about secret sauce. I think the secret sauce actually is about bringing other people into the process. The secret sauce is to make sure that you empower others who are also change agents to to contribute to the creation of the vision and the work that needs to be done, the plan to do it, and then, responsibility for the implementation of it. So it really is just about sharing the work.
And what keeps you up at night?
There's complacency for sure that will always wreak havoc, but there's something else that has been scaring me recently, and that is even though there are quite a number of municipalities and others in public leadership positions sitting on the benefits of the cultural planning and the policy and the work of artists that has been building here for decades. For some reason, there seems to be a little movement to abandon things that have been working, and some of that has to do, I think, with, interestingly enough, politicians beginning to think that they are getting it, and so they've got the idea, they've got the policy that they'd like for their program that they'd like, and without the kind of process that we would normally bring everybody into to make sure that the vision is right and the plan is right and the program is right, they decide to show a little heroic leadership, as opposed to accountable leadership, and all of a sudden there are announcements made or there are programs declared and money's moved from here to there. So I'm not sure exactly how you would label that, but that keeps me up at night.
If I just add to the complacency bomb that I dropped there,
Have we all subscribed?
that you all subscribe to, is that in your work, I feel like, and I sympathize with your work and I understand your work because some of my work is like your work, even though it's in a different type of institution. One should be just a little bit afraid of what you're going to do or what you should be doing about moving things forward. I agree with Burke that there are some things that have been built over many years, so they're really good ideas, and they have sustainability, but the ideas that the artists are bringing in sometimes challenge the structure, or challenge the engineering department, the permits department, but still, you should be willing to go to that table or to go to that meeting and challenge a little bit and not be sure what the outcome is going to be. When you're absolutely sure of that outcome, it's going to be a boring meeting probably for you and everybody else, and probably not great for your organization. I remember when my daughter graduated from UBC, Douglas Copeland was the keynote speaker, or what do you call the honorary speaker. And that was a beautiful speech as usual for Doug. But at the very end, he looks at the crowd and he says, "You're all so beautiful. You know, you're about to embark on exciting lives, and you have no idea that life is about to crush you like a bug." President Toop at that point went like, "Oh my God, why did we bring this guy?" But in fact, all he was saying is, you got to find your way. You got to find a different way, and so do you. And I've never forgotten that ceremony, and I use that statement as often as I can.
That's
To Douglas.
right there. I have one more question, then we're going to open it up. I think there's one mic here. Is there another one? Anyways, okay, so I asked you what keeps you up at night, or what you're afraid of, or what worries you. But what's the most exciting thing, times being what they are, that keeps you motivated in terms of the leadership that we have in this room and that is continuing to build?
Well, I can say, moving to a new kind of way of living in academia, I'm fond of saying to colleagues who ask me how it's going, I said I'm using way different muscles than I ever used before. And it's a lot of fun. And what's fun about it, and I guess it gives me the greatest amount of optimism, is that I'm seeing optimism within the students that I work with now, and the emerging artists that are coming through, because they're not ready to actually feel the crush of the world on them yet. But what I love about what we're trying to accomplish with the work that we're doing, and I see other work happening around the world, is that we are now putting a lot more effort in giving them the tools in which to really think about who they are, why they do what they do, what they're passionate about, and what they really want to continue exploring, and to give them an opportunity to take their explorations to levels of thinking and movement that turn to action. And so I'm completely optimistic about that, because I think I'm seeing tremendous work. Those of you know I've just finished my term on the county council board, and what I love about what the council is accomplishing, and it's going to be disruptive, and it is messy, and those of you who know clients who are trying to figure this out right now, they feel crushed like a bug, I'm sure, right now. But only to say that what I like about it, at its core, is that it's reflecting the way in which the artists are working today. And taking 147 programs down to 6 is a massive transformation that I believe at the end of the day, and end of the day being 5 years from now, I'm thinking in terms of ways to assess its success and value, is going to support the way arts are being created today.
So Sal, how do you turn around that Copeland statement to optimism?
Well, they have no time for that statement. That's the great thing. I said earlier that it's an exciting time to be in post-secondary, because what I'm seeing is exciting. It's not that what we're doing is so exciting, it's what the students are bringing is so exciting. They're much more informed people than we were. You cannot have an artistic movement or an artistic initiative that isn't tied to several other things. How is this good for immigrants? How is this good for youth? How is this good for women? How is this good for whatever? The student that I see, that is what gets me excited every day, and I'm excited to go to work every single day, because I see the potential and I see the complete disregard for our systems in the youth that's coming through the system now. And the youth, by the way, is 18 to 35. So they're fearless. They're fearless in a way because they didn't grow up with some of the funding envelopes that we had and that we had access to when there was more money around. So it's a very exciting time.
Punk rock is alive and well.
A couple things. One is that I'm feeling a lot better because we have a federal that very clearly speaks to the value of the arts and culture and creativity of this community and are prepared to invest in it. I think that that's a big change from the last 10 years. Encouraged by the fact that you are all here, that the Creative City Network is alive and thriving, and that your quest for knowledge and experience and the sharing of your expertise is alive and well, and that you're pursuing the knowledge and the skills that will enhance your capacity to do all those powerful things that the arts and creativity can do in your communities. And I would just encourage you once again to make that shift out of the arts alone and into cultural planning in a much more detailed and comprehensive way.
Thank you. So we will open it up. We have about 15 minutes for questions.
Hi, gentlemen. I think one thing Howard was talking about your gray hair. You still have hair, so that's good. Congratulations on that.
It's a win.
Yeah. My name is Kamiar. I'm with the Arts, Culture, and Heritage team at the City of Richmond. And we were talking about earlier, because you're in the business of post-secondary education, predominantly you're talking about youth. I have a two-part question. One is, in that discussion with the youth, and in a society where we really value innovation and new blood, and which is important, of course, and you all know that I know that from my past. How are we talking with those youth about not discarding the elders in their society? Because there are a lot of artists who don't do what we've done and made the transition to careers, for instance, cultural workers, who are still artists. I work with someone whose his name is Harry. He's an 80-year-old immigrant from China who's one of the most energetic, innovative, and disruptive people that I know. Doesn't always get the respect of a young, emerging artist. I used to have this joke that I used to hold on to the emerging artist mantle as long as I possibly could back when I was a practicing artist. So I'm just curious about how you deal with that in discussions with your students. And the part B of that is, how are post-secondary institutions right now working on developing diversity also within the artists and the student population that comes out? And those are the people that then we deal with as cultural workers. Because, for instance, I remember back when I was a university student, both in my undergrad and eventually even not that far back in my postgrad, that when I looked across the country, many of the faculties were complete lack of diversity in the faculty, and it's always that, we know that argument, so I won't rehash it further. I'm just curious how you're dealing with it now.
So the question of diversity and how do we ensure we're engaging all demographics and respecting them going forward in the industry. Howard?
I'm going to answer your first question first. That's an easier one for me, partly because so it goes a bit to my comment I made to Janice about how when she was talking about the importance of mentorship and how that is really, I'm sure many of us in the room, that's probably a core of some of the ways in which we developed our career. One of the interesting things that we're doing in our program at Creative and Cultural Entrepreneurship is I have a 13-week semester that we run. Interesting enough, for me anyway, in those 13 weeks, I actually have over 20 guest speakers come in and speak to the class. And what I actually say to them all is that we actually leave the program with 20 new email addresses that they've never had before. And what's wonderful about the groups the people that have agreed to come and speak with them is many of them are senior arts leaders, arts directors, artistic directors, etc. And they view it as their role to pay it forward as well. And what's happening is that the students are seeing the value of their experience. And now they're reaching out. And in fact, today I got an email from one of my students asking for one of the contacts that just came in last week. And only because, and I think at the time, as they entered in the classroom, all those people were inaccessible to them. They never knew how to reach them. They never knew how to ask a question of them. They never knew how to actually approach them. And now we're giving them doors in. And I think that's really important. It's really important on people like ourselves to be available and to be able to respond to those kinds of questions and opportunities. But I think that's where I think it all starts.
Thanks for your questions, Kanyar. So the first one, in terms of how do we approach youth or younger audiences, in terms of how do you have that relationship with that older knowledge, and what I suggest and what I guess inculcate in the various units that I have influence over is that we try to change the tenure of the actual exchange of knowledge. Again, as I said earlier, it used to be you come to us, we lecture you, you learn, you succeed, which is, there's a few faults in that formula. What we're trying to do is engage in conversations in smaller groups, smaller forums, have students have access to some of that knowledge of some of those elders, if you want to call them, or people who have a lot of experience, the 80-year-old or the 60-year-old or whatever. The premise that because they're old and because they're experienced, suddenly the one reason you should listen to them is really not resonating and doesn't do that well. But a conversation or a small group or a network of a small learning group, say as you have in some of the post-secondaries, is a much more powerful experience and a much more better way for them to engage and to see that value and for them to be able to access the mind of that individual, for example, that you mentioned. You sort of have to change the type of conversation that happens. And in terms of diversity, it's a challenge. In post-secondary, a lot of very good instructors are just having a really good time still teaching and are not retiring. And our average age now, is in the 50s, but we have instructors in their 70s and going some of them into their almost in the 80s, and they just don't want to let go because they're having such a good time, probably because of the students. The diversity issue, I've been at the forefront of that for as long as I can remember in Vancouver, because when I first came to Vancouver in '82, it's almost like, well, actually when I came to Canada in '72, to be Latino was exotic. People would invite me over and make chili and stuff. And, I said this in a talk, I said this in a TED talk, I had actually never had chili in my entire life. That was pretty good. But the important thing is that we have to open up opportunities. We have to do it. I do it sort of in my cultural guerrilla way. I do it through programming. We now have Bhangra courses, right? We now have Chinese literature. We now have examples of artistic expressions that were never part of the mainstream, and it's almost like they're infusing our teaching, and therefore eventually the students are going to want to hear it from the people that are from that community. They'll want to see the Aboriginal artists teaching that particular course, but it's still a struggle, and it's been a lot of years. We're still struggling. I'm sorry.
I'll just be quick. I have to say the same. It is tough, and it's going to stay tough. With respect to age, it really is about continuing to be creative and creatively engaged with the community. There's nothing that an institution can do for an individual like that, other than to continue to talk about the critical importance of keeping that creativity alive and to keep those people connected to the community as a whole, not just through their creativity, but as we all age out, we tend to become more remote from all of our previous experience, whether you're an artist or a disabilities or like myself. But the best things that we're doing, I think, from our point of view, is that we're changing the educational experience. We're putting it online. We're making it. There's a classical phrase about we've given up on the sage on the stage kind of format to the guide on the side, so that you're working with. But everything that we do too, people who are signed up in our courses are learning from their peers. You know, it's not just the guide on the side even that is the source of all knowledge. But still, and all, the worst challenge that I've ever faced, I think, involved in this particular phase of my career is that universities don't know anything about marketing. They don't know anything about communication. They know very little about outreach. You know, they focus entirely on their brand, and then the students are self-selecting. You know, that they will inquire as to who's got a course that might, you know, be there for my interest. But when we were starting up something that had never happened before, there was no money, no resources, no capacity within the organization's marketing department to actually let the world know that there was something new available. Right? I mean, so we're still kind of waiting for the world to learn about it word of mouth, you know, sort of from colleague to colleague, from you know, previous students to their colleagues. So it's just a continuous networking opportunity. We welcome diversity. That's one of the reasons why we're online, and we've got a great deal of diversity in the student membership. But as I said earlier, cultural planning is only about 25 years old, you know, at its front end, and it's going to take a while for this to work its way through the diverse communities of all the countries that engage in it at this stage. So I think it's going to take some time to play out.
I think we have time for one more question.
So thank you for that panel, which was great. I've just realized recently that I'm actually millennial, so I'll be sad about that. I thought I was Generation X or Generation Next or whatever that was back. But as a product of someone, I went to UBC a long time ago to study music, and a program that can't be online, so I was in voice performance, and that's a program that cannot be online. It is very intense. It's heads down. You do your stuff, you go in, you learn to be an opera singer, you leave, and you're like, Douglas Copeland is there crushing you, telling you that the world is crushing you. So, I mean, what would have been so wonderful when I was studying music was these programs, like the programs that can foster artist-led cultural leaders. Like we didn't have any education or courses where it was like, this is how you be an artist. This is how you make your way in the world. So I'm just wondering, I mean, these smaller institutions, like, or smaller programs, KPU, I know if that had existed when I was a student, it would have been so wonderful. I would do everything much differently. I wouldn't go to this giant institution. So I'm wondering, do you have any ideas of how these programs can work with really specific programs like the UC Opera program, or where it's all about like intense, so that those students can be offered those opportunities as well? Because that was something that I had to do that myself, and I did that myself, and I'm grateful for that. But it'd be so great if that existed in those very heads down programs. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
When we were developing the Creative Entrepreneurship Program, we actually did find a lot of other examples around. So there were some in a few other countries and so forth, but only to say that we felt we were kind of building from the ground up, kind of whiteboarding it, trying to figure out what would work. Since we've been doing it for now 2 years, we've now have been receiving a lot of interest from a lot of other institutions, wondering what it is that we're doing and how we're approaching it. For example, the National Theatre School would be one as a good example. Some of the training institutions are now looking at some of the dance training institutions, for example. I've now started to work with the Dancers Transition Resource Center to help dancers who are now moving out of their career as dancers because things give out apparently, and now trying to think about how they can use what it is they've trained their whole life doing into new careers, and that's kind of a very rewarding experience. So we're seeing a lot of traction in that area. The next part of it that we're hope to roll out is a more continuing studies aspect of it. So those artists and organizations that are kind of in their infancy stages as founders or whatever, and have started their companies, are finding, oh shit, whatever. I don't know how to actually market appropriately, or I don't know really how I should be thinking about fundraising in a particular way, or even finances, or even strategic planning. Those are the, you keep on doing it year over year. But only to say that we're trying now to address the opportunity that exists for artists who have actually have stepped into their entrepreneurial world now, are now we're trying to build their skill sets further. So we're looking at ways to actually connect as well.
There are a number of institutions that are somewhat responsive to the students in terms of, programming changes. Programs are very hard to change, especially in institutions that have senates. It just takes forever. But that doesn't mean that things cannot change and that you cannot introduce or offer to introduce, because now you're outside in the market, you would have knowledge that those students would gain from, to offer to these institutions smaller, short-term courses that can qualify them for what we now call in the system badges. So you did something in HR, or you did something in financial management or touring artists, those kinds of things that a lot of institutions are quite receptive to. Some of them actually become certificates, and some of them become actual full programs like SFU has. So there is actually a much bigger appetite than there was. I'm not sure exactly when you went to UBC. I tried starting this program at UBC in '98 in the music school, and it turned into a sort of the business of music, or as Bob Pritchard used to say, how not to lose money in the music business, which is the one thing that we're taught everything else except how to manage our finances. So we had to learn that the hard way. But there are many other lessons that need to be learned, or that a lot of information that's outside of the market that would be great for you to bring back to the institutions, because we are interested in listening to what you may feel is most important to that market that you interact with every day.
We don't actually address those specifics that you were looking at yet, but one of the things that we've been doing is going beyond the core courses that are the certificate-based courses, which are very intensive and just a hell of a lot of work. And I don't want to scare you off, because it's absolutely worth doing, but it does require a time commitment and a pretty hefty energy commitment. So for those things that can actually be addressed in a much more concentrated but briefer fashion, we started quite a broad series of workshops, online workshops, and seminars, webinars, whatever you want to call them. And we're working with a variety of different formats. Carrie Arthurs is here for the Center for Cultural Planning and Development, and I really encourage you to talk to her. Any of you who have an interest in things beyond the fundamental courses, but also might have some ideas about what you'd like to see if you don't actually see a workshop already lined up. Because we're very flexible about this, and we really do like to respond to what it is that you're interested in knowing more about. So we're not addressing that subject matter right now, but I think that's how we're going about addressing those kinds of subjects, and we're trying to be very responsive to it.
Thank you. So final remarks in 140 characters or less.
Okay. Go ahead.
You can take 160 characters.
Age before beauty. Aim high. Keep open and aim high. Share the work. Bring in as many people as you possibly can to everything that you do. Share the credit. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't mind giving away the credit. Politicians love that. Artists love that. And never, ever, 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 never, ever give up.
That's going to be hard to follow. I say just, again, listen to the artists, listen to your community, and you'll find inspiration on both sides of that equation. And that inspiration is what will lead to motivation, both for the artist and for your community and for yourself in your work and in trying to steer the various levels of government that you have to deal with to move along the lines that drove you to that job in the first place, which was that love of art. So keep loving it.
I enter into my sunset years. I can't listen to fear. I really can't believe how fortunate I have been associated with so many wonderful thinkers and creative individuals, and that's what it's been about. I've had so much joy and appreciation for the work that I've been able to be involved with. So at the end of the day, it's all fun. You're making a difference. and you're making a difference in your life, your own life, you're making a difference in your community's life, and you're making our world a better place.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much, and thank you, Sheila and the Creative Cities Network, for inviting me.
So our theme is bridging cultures and building community. And Howard, you sort of stole my thunder at the end there a little bit when you were talking about just how fortunate you feel to work with the people that you've had the opportunity to over the years. And that's what I want to say about all of you. This is like a dream team panel for me. You can imagine how fortunate we feel in the Lower Mainland to have people like these individuals leading educational institutions in our community. But I want to point out that we all represent cities from across Canada. We all have academic institutions in our communities, and they're full of all of these optimistic young idealists. So I would really hope that you'll go away from this particular panel thinking about what cities can do to minimize that bug-crushing impact on all those young idealists out there, and take away some of the wisdom from this group in terms of the collaboration and the relationship building that we do so well as a Creative City Network, but applying it even more to our communities and our academic communities in particular. So thank you to all of you for your time today. Really appreciate it.